Funding for this project has been provided by the governments of Canada and British Columbia through Growing Forward 2, a federal, provincial, territorial initiative. With their support and the support of Columbia Basin Trust, the City of Revelstoke, and Interior Health, we're setting the stage for entrepreneurs to build viable food businesses. Hi, I'm Sylvia Chong of Foundtree TV, where food entrepreneurs can get insider tips and advice on how to master their small-scale food processing operations. On World Food Day, I had the honor of facilitating a talk on exploring value-added opportunities in agriculture in Revelstoke, BC. This event was hosted, sponsored, and organized by the Community Connections Revelstoke Society.
My name is Melissa Hemphill, and I'm the Food Security Coordinator at Community Connections in Revelstoke, BC. Revelstoke recently hosted a workshop about bringing your food products to market. Rather than just keeping it to those few people who could attend, we'd like to share this with our local neighbors and our region so that we can grow our food system together.
This video is the first of a three-part series that summarizes the content of the presentation. These videos are intended for the entrepreneur who's planning to commercialize a food product. You could be a producer looking to diversify, a processor who's looking to expand your current business, or someone with a great product idea who's about to start a food business. In this first video, I'll be showing you a way to assess your product idea. In the second video, we'll focus on food safety and regulatory requirements, and the last video will be about designing an efficient process and consistent product. I hope you find these videos useful and welcome you to post your comments and questions below. Value-added agriculture is the term used to describe changing a raw agricultural product into something new by packaging, processing, cooling, extracting, or any process that differentiates it from the original commodity. A strawberry is a raw agricultural product, but strawberry jam is a value-added product. Although this video series is focused on agri-food, value-added agriculture can include things like fibers, natural health products, cosmetics, and more. So you've decided to develop a food product. Developing a product can be really exciting, but it's also costly and the risk of failure is high. New products fail for many reasons, but one way you can reduce the risk of failure is by continuously looking for validation of legal, technical, market, and economic viability. We will focus on how you can look for legal and technical viability. Feasibility studies are a formal, high-level way of evaluating your product idea. It can help you make an informed business decision. If you're not prepared to do it yourself, consultants can help you with this, but ultimately, the decision to move forward with the business venture or not is up to you. So if you're like me and seek to fully understand the concept in order to make an informed decision, I'll show you how you can assess your product idea. There are just 3 steps to assessing your product idea. First, we start by defining what the concept is. I've been involved in developing many new products where the concept wasn't clearly defined in the first place, making it a moving target. Defining your concept doesn't mean that it can't or won't change later on, but it removes all ambiguity so you can give it a fair chance in the assessment stage. If you're not 100% sure what your product will look like, use this first step as a tool to help you be more specific. There's nothing worse than working on a project to later admit to yourself that it really wasn't your thing. After all, you're devoting your time, energy, and resources on it. So next you'll ask yourself some questions to just make sure it really resonates with you. By the time you get to step 3, you know what your product idea is and you know that it's right for you. So now what? We'll look at what's required to make it happen from the technical and operational side. There are many ways to describe a product and just as many aspects to building one. Our focus will be on the technical and operational pieces, so we'll get started building it from that perspective. These are examples of product description tables. Some of you may recognize this as the same table that's found in a food safety plan. I like to start here when assessing my product idea because I'll need to do this at some point in the development process anyways. The table on the left is from the BC Food Safety Plan workbook, and the one on the right is from the CFIA's Preventive Control Plan. You can use either, but I like to use the one on the left because it's a little bit more descriptive. The elements of a product description table are the product name, the important final characteristics, the ingredients and inputs, packaging, how it will be used, the shelf life and storage conditions, where it will be sold, labeling, and distribution control. I'm going to use the one in my Food Safety Plan workbook for BC for my product idea of strawberry jam. What you name your product matters, and it's because some product names have associated standards of identity, and essentially, when you're using a product name with a standard of identity, then you're triggering some regulatory requirements. So let's go to the CFIA website at inspection.gc.ca. You'll be prompted to select either English or French. I've selected English. There's a menu on the left, and in that menu find List of Acts and Regulations and click on that. Once you're in, we're going to have a look at the processed products regulations because that's likely where we'll find any standards or requirements pertaining to jam. Let's click on Standards of Identity here, and you can see that jam is one of the first things that comes up. We're not going to get into the details of what those standards of identity for jam are. However, I do want to point out that it's important for you to look at these, and if there are associated standards, to make sure right in the beginning that you're planning to meet them. Because, for example, if you look at jam, one of the requirements is that it shall contain not less than 45% of the named fruit. And it's just easier to formulate your product with a minimum of 45% fruit right from the beginning than to have to change it later. So when you get to this part of the table where it reads weight or volume, go ahead and insert your net quantity. What I mean by net quantity is the amount of product in each unit, measured in grams or kilograms for things that are solid like meatloaf, or milliliters or liters for liquids like milk. Or you might use the number of pieces, such as 12 eggs. Now let's look at numbers 2 and 3 in this table. These are about the product's final characteristics. Let's identify what the customer is going to do with it and what characteristics will make it safe to eat. Jam is commonly served without any further preparation, so I'm going to put ready to eat in number 2. And at this point, I'm not 100% sure what will make it safe, but I know that it's going to be cooked, and one of the reasons why lemon juice is used is to increase acidity. The intensity of acidity of a food is expressed by its pH value. The pH of a food is one of several important factors that determine the survival and growth of microorganisms during processing, storage, and distribution. Jam is one of those acidified foods, food in which pH is lowered to 4.6 or less by the addition of acids. So I'm going to go ahead and describe my product as cooked, and instead of high acid or acidified, I'm just going to put pH less than 4.6. Number 4 is about allergens. What allergens are in the product? Well, my ingredients are strawberry, sugar, pectin, and lemon juice, and I've cross-referenced these with the top 10 priority allergens in Canada, and there are no allergens in my strawberry jam, so I'm going to put none. Be sure to look closely at your ingredients and its subcomponents. For example, many brands of lemon juice are not just 100% lemon juice and can contain other ingredients such as sodium metabisulfite, which is a preservative and an allergen. If I were to use a lemon juice that contains sodium metabisulfite, I would have to declare it on the label. Let's look at number 5 now. You might be wondering how to find out if you're using a restricted ingredient. Health Canada has a list of permitted food additives, some of which have restrictions for use. There are 15 types of food additives, and you can find this list by searching for List of Permitted Food Additives Health Canada. Now, if your product does contain a food additive as an ingredient or even a sub-ingredient, you're going to want to check for restrictions and ensure that you stay within the guidelines. To do this, I'll go to the list of permitted food additives. If, for example, I was using xanthan gum as an emulsifier in salad dressing, I would click on number 4, the list of permitted emulsifying, gelling, stabilizing, or thickening agents, and scroll right down to xanthan gum. The second column tells me in what food applications xanthan gum can be used in, and the column on the right will list the restrictions and corresponding regulations. So when it reads good manufacturing practice, it means that you can use the additive in accordance to practices that ensure it is consistently safe and conforms to regulatory and safety requirements. So moving on to number 6 now, let's list the processing steps. In your food safety plan, you'll have to expand on this in some good detail, but for the product description table, I want to keep it simple and just identify the major processing steps. Strawberry jam is shelf stable, and in order to make it shelf stable, I know there will be a sterilization and or a pasteurization step, so I'll just add that to my table. I'll be packing my jam into glass jars and applying a product label directly onto the jar, so I wrote glass jars in number 7. When you're choosing packaging materials, always ensure that they're food grade, and depending on product or process requirements, clean and or sterile before use. Next, let's look at how the product will be stored. Food products are either refrigerated, frozen, or stored at room temperature. Jam is typically stored under dry conditions at room temperature, so I'm going to add dry storage. You might come across the term special distribution control. This is referring to the shipping conditions of your product and is usually the same as the storage conditions. The next part of this table is about shelf life. Shelf life is the amount of time that a product can be stored for under the indicated conditions until it's unfit for consumption. I use 2 qualifiers to determine the shelf life of food. One is safety and the other is quality. Microorganisms grow on food, and some will eventually cause spoilage, making the food unsafe to eat. Food deteriorates over time, and at some point, the quality is going to change enough to make it unappealing to eat, even if it doesn't make us sick. If you're at the ideation stage of product development, you can look at other similar products and make an educated guess about what your product shelf life will be. You can confirm your estimated shelf life by testing it later on. I'm going to estimate that my jam has a shelf life of at least 12 months, and I chose 12 months because jam is shelf stable and it sits on a grocery shelf or in your pantry for a really long time, and it's more likely that we'll see a loss in quality before jam becomes unsafe to eat. So now that I have a general idea of my product shelf life, let's figure out what durable life markings I'll need to put on the label. First, let's understand the terms used for date labeling and go to the CFIA website. Let's Google that. Okay, there are different kinds of date markings depending on the product. The most common terms used are best before dates and packaged on dates and expiration dates. So it says here that a best before date tells you when the durable life ends, and durable life is the amount of time a product retains freshness, taste, nutritional value, and any other qualities claimed by the manufacturer. It doesn't guarantee product safety, but gives you an indication of freshness and potential shelf life. The packaging date is the date a food was packaged on, and it's used with foods with a durable life of 90 days or less. And it must be accompanied by durable life information on the label or on a poster next to the food. Expiration dates are required for food that have strict compositional requirements which might not be met after the expiration date. So it's required for formulated liquid diets, food for low energy diets, meal replacements, nutritional supplements, and infant formula. You can also read up on other date markings here too. Now, if your product has a durable life of 90 days or less and is prepackaged, you must have a best before date and storage instructions if it's not room temperature, and that goes on the label. But if it's packaged on site, then you also need to put a packaged on date onto the label. The CFI website on date labeling for prepackaged foods indicates that best before dates are required for foods with a durable life of 90 days or less. Now, my strawberry jam has a shelf life of 12 months, which is greater than 90 days, so I'm not going to put a best before date. However, I am going to put the lot code on the label. You can use any type of cryptic or non-cryptic lot code as long as you can trace it, but you'll see here that I've used the packaged on date. And I want you to be aware that whenever you use any type of date marking, there's a specific format prescribed by the CFIA. Always declare the last 2 digits of the year first, followed by the alphabetical abbreviation for the month and then the numerical date. The next part of the product description table is about the target market. There's an acronym, YOPI, or YOPI, that stands for Young, Old, Pregnant, and Immunocompromised. These individuals are at a higher risk for contracting a foodborne illness, and ready-to-eat foods that are specifically prepared for these persons at high risk require industry verification and control, as well as regulatory oversight and compliance activities. My strawberry jam is intended for the public, so my target market is not those at high risk. So I'll go ahead and write general public here. If you take a package of ham and put it in the sun, bacteria starts to grow rapidly, and the ham becomes undesirable and unsafe to eat pretty quickly. One way to prevent consumers from mishandling the product like this is to put on your label the statement, "Keep refrigerated." Strawberry jam doesn't require refrigeration or frozen storage, so I'm going to go ahead and write "Not applicable" here. We finished our first step, and that's describing our product in a pretty detailed way. Now that we have a good understanding of what our product will be, we can assess it for feasibility by using some filters. This next part will involve looking at the product to see if it's right for you or not and what it will take to commercialize it. Is it right for me? This is a pretty big question. Like all big decisions in life, at the core of all our worries, our fears, our insecurities, and our doubts is knowing whether or not something is right for you or not. If you were buying a house, you might look at things like the location, the nearby amenities, how many bedrooms it has, the condition of the home, how it's heated, and maybe even the resale value. These are all very tangible things, but when it comes down to it, if you're buying a house and it just doesn't feel right, it's not going to work. The first question I want you to ask yourself is whether or not you really love the product idea or not. What's your gut reaction? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or is it just okay? Does your product idea fit with your business model? If I'm a farmer who grows strawberries and I have more strawberries than I can sell in the window where it's ripe, then I need to find a home for everything else. How I make money right now is by wholesaling my strawberries to local grocery stores, and I also sell it at the farmers market. If I can find the resources to put the infrastructure in place that I need and get the help that I need, then I could freeze the strawberries and process it later in the off season to make strawberry jam. So if I don't have the resources, the energy, or time to be making strawberry jam, and I just want to spend all my time growing strawberries, then making jam might not fit with my business model. Your mission, vision, and values are unique to you. Even if you don't have these written down in a formal way, you, the entrepreneur, know what vision you have for your life and what values you live by. Does the product idea match? Success doesn't just happen. You, the entrepreneur, play the most active role in determining the outcome of any and all of your business ventures. Do you have the time, energy, and personal resources to make it? What else is happening in your life that might present challenges in getting this off the ground and keeping it running? What's your capacity for starting this business venture? Okay, now that we know what our product is and we're really sure that it's right for us, here comes the fun part. What do we need to make the product idea come to life? It's a given that you need to meet regulatory requirements in order to run a successful business. When you come to this part, you have just one thing on your to-do list, and that's to find out what your regulatory requirements are. I've been told that food safety and regulatory requirements can be a little scary and daunting, so we've dedicated the next module and video to just that. As part of your regulatory requirements for making a food product, you'll need access to a commercial kitchen and storage for raw materials and/or finished product. So your homework here is to find out what your options are and what each option will cost. When it comes to food processing, equipment is essential. This includes everything from your utensils like knives and whisks to your processing equipment like mixers and kettles and weigh scales. Equipment, then, is our next filter. So chances are you've made your product in your home kitchen, but when you go to commercialize it, you're going to gain a lot of efficiency by using industrial equipment and scaling up. So how do I go about deciding on my batch size and equipment? Let's walk through my thought process on this. I can make about a dozen or so jars of strawberry jam by using a stock pot, a stovetop, and filling each jar by hand. So I do some research and find that a steam jacketed kettle is the right solution. There are many options for kettles ranging anywhere from 5 gallons to 500 gallons and more. So I look around, I get some quotes, and my 5-gallon kettle is going to cost me about $2,000. But I have limited funds, so I decided that I'm going to start out with using a stock pot on the stovetop, and as the business grows and the demand grows, then I'll also be collecting revenue to help fund the new equipment. So when you get to the equipment filter, I want you to consider what the bare minimum is that you need to get started, and then what does the next stage of growth look like? It's up to you where you start. Now let's look at capital investment. In addition to equipment, some of your upfront costs will be your raw materials, your packaging, your labels, rent or lease, and it might even include storage, distribution, and transportation. Your homework is to make a list of all your costs and put some rough numbers to it. Then compare it to how much capital you have access to. You might find it helpful to create a budget for your business venture at this point. When you're looking at the next filter of distribution and storage, the geographic location of your end market will determine what your options are. I decided to sell my strawberry jam to local retailers and at the farmers market. I know this is a shelf-stable product, so I know I can safely transport my jam using my personal vehicle. It's not uncommon for food entrepreneurs to do this, especially if you're starting out. But if you decide to do this, I urge you to ensure that the food is protected from contamination and stored at the proper temperature for the entire duration of travel. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if I was packaging dried mushrooms for sale to Asia, I might consider a broker or distributor, the cost and feasibility of which needs to be included in your product assessment. So the next filter is marketing. While this can be a really big subject, I just want you to look at two things: opportunity and placement. How do we know if there's a true opportunity for a product or not? One of the projects I'm working on is developing a gluten-free flour. Now, if you know anything about the gluten-free market, you know that it's big. Not only are celiacs and people who are intolerant to gluten buying it, but so are the health conscious. So if I were to develop a gluten-free flour, I would develop it with that in mind. Perhaps I could use plant ingredients that have known health benefits. So instead of positioning it as a gluten-free flour, I would point out the health benefits and put it in front of those consumers who are looking for those health benefits. People who shop at natural health food stores are very focused on their health, and that might be a really good outlet for my product. These are just some of the questions or filters that I want you to ask yourself. When you come up with any more questions or filters, please share them by posting it in the comments below. So the last filter I'm going to talk about is access to raw materials and labor. If you're a farmer, this is where you're going to be doing some production planning on the crop side and estimate how much of the raw material you can produce in a given amount of time, say in a season. For raw materials that are purchased, you're going to assess how stable the supply and price of that raw material is. And this is where you might want to look at some historical data on shortages and find out why they happened. When you look at access to raw materials, you have two goals. One, establish how much of the raw materials that you have access to, as this can limit production. You can compare this to the expected demand for the product and either make preparations to access more of the ingredient or scale your business accordingly. So for example, I can produce about 500 pounds of strawberries in a given season, 300 of which I can dedicate to processing. If demand increases for my jam, then I might want to think about planting more strawberries. 2. Understand the volatility of the market so you can avoid potential shortages or at least be prepared. Know what ingredients you use a lot of and stay connected to market information so you can plan accordingly. If you're considering hiring production staff, explore what this will look like. How often you produce product will dictate to a certain extent what options are available to you. So your homework is, if you are planning on hiring labor, to identify what your needs are and look at what's accessible to you. Now that we've made it through our 3 steps to assessing a product idea, let's summarize what we've learned. In the first step, we clearly defined our product concept using a product description table that eventually makes its way into your food safety plan. Next, we did a little check-in just to make sure that the product idea is the right fit for us. Lastly, we looked at what it takes to make it happen. We've only just scraped the surface of step 3, so join me in our next video to find out what your food safety and regulatory requirements are. To receive an email notification when the next video airs, sign up for my mailing list at www.foundtree.ca. Thanks for watching Foundtree TV. I'm Sylvia Chong, taking you through the first steps of developing a food product. Let's hear from you next. What's your product idea? What's your biggest challenge to commercialization? Post it in the comments below and be sure to like this video.